So hi everybody and welcome back to MIAC's Artist and Scholar Dialogue series where MIAC staff and curators are speaking with different artists and scholars about their work, the impact the pandemic has had on their practice, and just what they've been up to over the past year. My name is Lillia McEnaney and I am an assistant curator at the museum, and today we're going to be speaking with Darby Raymond-Overstreet. Darby is a Diné digital artist and printmaker, and I'm so excited to have her here today. But before we start chatting with Darby, I'd like to briefly acknowledge the place where this conversation is happening, even though we are in a virtual space and not at the museum today, in Ogopoge within the Tawa world. As a non-native person living in so-called Santa Fe, I am a guest in the ancestral homelands of the Tawa people, and I wish to acknowledge all of the indigenous communities, Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, and so many others, past, present, and future, who walk on these lands and live with us. So Darby, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here today. So to get us started, maybe for the viewers who don't know you and your work, why don't we start with a brief introduction, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So yeah, I'll just introduce myself. Yat she Darby Inisha, Huantlana Nishle, Bilagana Bashichin, Kia Ani Rashiche, Donahile Rashanala. Hello, everyone. I'm Darby Raymond-Overstreet, and I'm a Diné artist based out of northern New Mexico, just north of Santa Fe and Chimayo. And yeah, I'm based out of northern New Mexico, and I'm a digital artist and mixed media artist, and also a printmaker. I also do like illustration and a bit of beadwork, but I'm probably most well known for my portraiture, which is my digital mixed media art, where I'm kind of portraying Diné people through textiles, and then also probably for my printmaking, where I'm, creating and designing pattern designs that are kind of based off of my study of Navajo weaving for the portraits. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. So you mentioned that you work in a few different mediums. So can you tell us a little bit about your artistic journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, I probably didn't start like creating art with any degree of seriousness until I got into college. I've always liked to create just my whole life, but I kind of didn't think that I would pursue art personally. But yeah, when I got to college, that kind of shifted. Just growing and changing and having different experiences. I'd say I went to Dartmouth College, which is in New Hampshire, which is all the way across the country from Arizona, which is where I grew up. And so I was really like homesick and, longing for my family and my community. And just, it was such a culture shock to be on the East Coast for me, just a completely different environment. And so I was really kind of just longing for what I had just left behind. And so that definitely kind of influenced the work that I ended up making while I was in college. I'd also say that like my involvement with the Native American community there was also was one of those things that really contributed to me starting to make art, because I mean, that's where I met just such wonderful people. I was just surrounded by really awesome, like fierce indigenous people, like pursuing scholarly work, but also just an array of people that I'm still really good friends with, and so happy I met them. But we were really active and involved in just kind of making our presence as Native Americans, Indigenous people known on campus, which was really influential, I think, on what kind of motivated me to start making art. And one thing that I remember specifically from that time is, so this is like 2012, and around that time is like when Urban Outfitters had kind of like released this like Navajo line, and they had like Navajo panties and flasks, and it was just horrible. I mean, they were appropriating like so many different cultures, but that time I remember we were really just the Native community was really talking about it. And So I had friends that were like making videos in response to this and who were also like writing poetry, just, and we're all sharing it and talking about it in like this community space that we had. And so, yeah, I think that kind of sparked me to really start thinking of ways how I could address that. And like I said, I went to Dartmouth and I didn't think I was going to pursue art, but I was also, still kind of struggling from being away from home. And then also just the level of academic rigor I wasn't super prepared for, I think. Like I just went to public school in Arizona. And so, yeah, I was kind of struggling in a multitude of ways, but there was a term where I took my first art class, drawing one, and I took it because like everybody has to take an art class, and so I was like, oh, I want to take drawing, and so I got my friend, and we were taking drawing together, and yeah, things just like really shifted. Like I had so much just like fun in that class, and I mean, I spent the most time in that class. I was in the studio, the drawing studios, like just all the time. It felt like I would do like my homework for other classes in the drawing studio. So it really felt like home for me. And I still probably wasn't even thinking of taking more classes at that point, but I had a professor who was teaching the class, Colleen Randall. She's a phenomenal painter. But, at the end of the course, she came up to me and was like, you should consider taking more classes in this department. I think you would do well here. And I feel like if she hadn't told me that, who knows, I might not have really taken more classes because that wasn't what I was going to do. But yeah, I took her suggestion and I did, and just kind of grew with each course and really learned kind of how to create with intention and work in different mediums. And so things like all these things kind of came together at once, it feels like. And so, yeah, just integrating what I was experiencing in the NAD community and just like drawing from my own experiences in my life. In all of my art classes, I started trying to like make my art about what I was thinking and experiencing. And so in response to the whole like appropriation by Urban Outfitters, like I wanted to show people, who these well, first of all, what Navajo design and aesthetic actually is, and then who these designs come from and kind of the circumstances under which they were made. And so it kind of dove into the history of like the Southwest trade industry when all of these rugs are like being woven and kind of acquired through trade and then being sent out to the East Coast, which I think kind of could have planted the seed for appropriating those designs that we see today. And so, yeah, it just became about wanting to show, talk about the designs itself and like show the art of my community, but then also to like portray Diné people in as a genuine and authentic way, because we're also like combating a lot of stereotypes with this type of stuff. And yeah, it just all kind of stemmed from all these experiences. It's like everything kind of happened at once and I wasn't planning for it or expecting it, but yeah, I've just kind of all of that got the ball rolling and I've just kept going with it, and that's how I kind of got started and how I got to where I am.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate you talking about your time at Dartmouth. And you said the value of creating with intention, that I think it's just a really wonderful way to think about your work. And also just the value of a great teacher. I think it really speaks to that too. So you talked about this a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about the role of process in your work. You kind of have two specific bodies of work that do overlap, but maybe first you can talk about the digital prints and how they are inspired by historic weaving patterns, and just maybe delve into that side of your work a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, the process it's kind of like, in a way, it's almost like abstract to think about it because um, it happens every day, right? And so all of this, and that because I do work in different mediums, it's hard for me to kind of just differentiate like the process between each one because they do influence each other so much. And like just when I think about my process right now and like kind of how it's always been is like I just try to work on art every day. And so it's just kind of ever changing and evolving with time. But I guess like specifically like with the textile patterns and kind of how the how I started working with those is, I was really just bringing together all of the knowledge that I was acquiring in school and in class. And, the best way that I communicate is through art. I'm not like stellar at like writing or like, do it. Like I couldn't like pursue academia in that way, but, so that process really just kind of came naturally to me. It's hard for me to kind of explain what it, how it happened or like what it is, but basically I started looking at these catalog books. Like I went to the library at Dartmouth and like checked out all of the catalogs on Navajo weaving and was just like looking through them and then reading about the history and like seeing like, how do these anthropologists like talk about our culture and our work. And so I was really just like learning a lot. And of course I'm taking art classes at the same time. And so it kind of just like filtered in to what I was doing in my class. And it just happened that when I started with the pattern portraits that I was taking a digital drawing class, and it was like the first ever digital drawing class that was taught there. And so, yeah, I was like, I had been wanting to do digital drawing before then. So I already had a tablet and was like trying to teach myself with like YouTube videos, but this class was offered and it just like felt like the clouds parting or something. Like I don't know how this happened, but yeah, so I was taking that class and then was looking at these catalogs and kind of was just like feeling like the way that people were talking about it sometimes, or like how it's kind of spoken, it feels like removed. And I feel like when, like, say I look at a weaving, like that feels like it's a part of me. Like my great grandmother was a weaver, so I grew up looking at her weavings in my family's homes. And so it's not like this thing that's like just like I read about in a book. It's something that I interact with and experience, and it's influenced my life so much. And so I really I borrowed from those catalogs and was using the pictures of the weavings and started implementing them into the portraits that I was working on. And so it became about like this connection. And like I said, it just kind of has grown over time. And every day, I just work with what's going on in my head. So that's like what the process is. It's like, my lived experience. It's like what's not a part of the process, kind of. Yeah, that's kind of like how that happened. And every time that there's any like advancements in my work or like technique or skill, it's just because I'm just working towards it every day and trying to be like intentional with what I'm doing.
That's fantastic. I mean, yeah, it seems like there's just a confluence of things that just all came together at once in this really kind of remarkable way. Yeah, I mean, it's so important in these conversations to think about. You said when you look at a weaving, it's a part of me, right? It's not like an anthropological artifact or
Right.
specimen or anything like that. So kind of critiquing anthropology within your work is also so clear. And I think that's it just really sets your work apart because you can really hear that. You can hear your voice in that through your pieces. So that's why I'm a huge fan. So thank you for sharing that. And then can we talk a little bit about your cultural portraits? I think this leads into that side of your work really well too.
Oh, like with the loom pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of like, I guess to add on to what you said, kind of this, I guess, critique of anthropology, in that it seems like anthropology in a way like others people, and so it's like that's the only like lens that you're looking at these other people through. And so when I started doing like I had been working on the pattern portraits digitally for a while before I started integrating the loom, and which is I build the looms custom to each portrait, and I print the digital portrait out and onto canvas, and then kind of use yarn to string it up into the loom. So it's really like this presentation of this person who's like been woven. But the loom became so important because it's important to kind of show that, these objects aren't just like things that are, I mean, I guess now they're kind of just stored places, but there's so much more to them. They were made by somebody. They came from this culture who like uses this technology to create these beautiful pieces of art. And so it's just became important that I kind of switch the perspective onto, the people that made them, the weavers. And then to just like, I wanted to show like the frame of the loom, to just make it kind of this like star of the piece. But it's also kind of this mechanism through which I can kind of hopefully put the viewer, whoever's looking at the piece, into the place of the weaver, like in front of the loom themselves. And so I'm hoping that that kind of like forges this connection that otherwise is not there when you're just looking at these catalogs, or you're looking at these books or these collections. You're sitting in the place of the person who, wove this pattern, and, really wove to kind of keep these, the current generations of Diné people, going in here. Like, we're here because of what our ancestors did. And so I'm kind of hoping that use of the loom is a way for my viewers to feel more connected to the weavings, but also like connected to the people themselves.
Yeah, and what you said, putting the viewer in the place of the weaver, that explicitly works against that otherness in anthropology.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's just really incredible, and your work is so important. Your work is just really, really doing fabulous things. So thank you. So I'd love to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about the last year. The pandemic has obviously changed everything for everybody, but I'd love to hear how 2020 and the ongoing 2021 has changed your artistic practice. And I saw on your website that you are making masks. So a little bit about just how the pandemic has changed your artistic practice.
Well, I mean, it's been an interesting time, for me personally. I'm, still like an emerging artist, so I'm kind of like navigating like how to really like do this. And so, in 2019, I was like really looking forward to 2020 because I had been working since I moved here to Santa Fe, or I moved to Santa Fe and then moved out to where I'm at now. But once I moved here, I was working a full-time job to kind of supplement my income so that I could, of course, pay my bills and whatnot, but also to kind of kickstart my art career. You got to pay for market fees and like booth fees and, of course, material. So I was kind of like doing this like double thing and really trying to get my career started. And then 2019, I decided, I was in a good place to kind of not be working full time. And I was really going to jump into the markets and really get my art out there and, just be in the scene as much as I could. And so, yeah, that didn't happen, obviously, because everything got canceled. And I was kind of in this weird place of like, what am I gonna, like, how do I keep pursuing this dream, my career, like of showing my art, like through this time when nobody can see it in person, like at all this year. And it just, opportunities seemed like they kept kind of disappearing and like going away. And so it was, just a moment of kind of like, wow, this is like real. I think it was probably like a year ago that was like starting to feel really real. And so, of course, I was worried about those opportunities, but I was really just like worried about my family and community too. So it really kind of just was like everything stopped, and it became a time to really just like check in with family. And so I guess in that way, my art practice kind of just kind of stopped for a while. It was time to just take a break and be present with the moment and what was happening, and really be just experiencing that time. But Eventually, things did kind of pick up again. I was trying to figure out, the whole virtual scene, because then everything was going virtual. And so I did keep creating art, but was trying to really make things that could, be purchased online. So that's the biggest way that kind of, I guess, my practice has shifted. And I really started focusing a lot more on my printmaking too, because it was working more abstractly. I actually haven't just, yeah, it's been probably like a year since I've actually made a full pattern portrait, because, well, like I have one that I've been working on and off on, but I just, it was hard for me to work on that body of work, I think, because of the social isolation aspect of kind of the pandemic. And, my work is so rooted in my family and my friends, and just not being able to be around people, like I just couldn't do the portraits. It just wasn't, I didn't have the energy for it. So I started working more abstractly on my printmaking, and actually I've just made these really like awesome, huge strides that I'm really proud of, in that kind of implementing new techniques and different mediums with those. And so, yeah, that shift, thinking more virtually, and then for virtual marketplaces, and then also just shifting to this more abstract kind of geometric, like collage work that I do, is probably like the biggest ways that the pandemic has shifted my art practice.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Can you tell us what strides specifically you've made? And
Oh yeah. So, well, in my printmaking, I will make these pattern designs, and they're kind of just these like isolated kind of configurations that I make, geometric, inspired based off of the weavings that I study. But I make them, and then oftentimes I'll like cut them up and then rearrange them, like cut them up like multiple, like an addition of like 10 or so, and then rearrange them and collage them back together. And it turns this original pattern design into this like bigger, more kind of complex, like unfolding looking composition. And with those works in specific, when I frame them, it kind of feels like they're like dying before my eyes. Like I can't like articulate what it is. It's just like the change in light. And, I work into them using different mediums, like, because I have this vision of what I want them to look like or how I want them to feel. And so I'm doing a lot of work to make these like subtle shifts, and for the composition to kind of just feel seamless in a way. But when I frame them, it seems like all of the subtleties that I work so hard on kind of like become diminished. And so I had been wanting to kind of develop a way to display these pieces in a way that I wouldn't have to frame them. And after a lot of, I guess, like scrolling on Instagram and like YouTube videos, and then just like all these things that I kind of consume, and then conversations with other artists, I kind of landed on using resin to seal the prints onto a backing. And so that's what I've been working on developing probably in the past year. And I've just like, I really like the way it comes out, and it looks just beautiful, and it looks exactly like how I would like it to be. And I have a scroll saw, so I actually can cut out the patterns from on the backing too with the resin. And so it's like a kind of just like a clear like piece of glass, almost like on top of this thing. And all of the geometries of the edges are completely preserved, and it like casts shadows onto the light or onto the wall. So yeah, it's been really fun.
wow, that's incredible. I think it's so interesting that you think framing kind of works against your vision and hides the intricacies. While you were talking about that, I was thinking it's kind of parallel to the idea of containment within museum catalogs, right? And anthropological
Totally.
violence, and just kind of, yeah, containment, that you see kind of in the separation between the weaver and the actual weaving in the museum catalog, how those kind of two things are very separate. So it's really interesting to hear that parallel in the way that you're thinking about your work.
Yeah.
Cool. So the last question that I have for you is, I mean, last week we got the announcement about the in-person 2021 SWIA, which is exciting. So I'm just curious where you see the world of Native art moving as a result of the past year.
Oh, I mean, where is it going? I feel like it's going where we're taking it right now, in a way. Well, I think that the future, we'll always strive to, have as much in-person things as possible. Like that's kind of like the ideal, like standard to, be able to show people art in person, and to not have this like distance. And I think it's really important. But I feel like we should also like I'm hoping that this like virtual aspect of the native art world kind of sticks around because I feel like it's really we've all adapted to it too. Like we've all kind of grown this skill set of being able to market ourselves on these virtual platforms. And I feel like we kind of in turn have been able to maybe reach a wider audience than we might like at these markets where it's like kind of the same people attend them every year. Like that's like their, vacation time that they take like all the time year after year. But I think that it would be great if we could keep these virtual spaces open because I feel like, especially like my generation, we're shopping online so much. And I know so many people want to support Indigenous artists, they want to support Indigenous business. And so, in that regard, I think that we shouldn't just get rid of all of the virtual infrastructure that we've had to develop over the past year. I think it's a great tool, and I think it's a great way for us to reach more people and also, share our art and our vision and all of these important issues that we talk about through our work. And so I hope that it's more of a hybrid future of virtual and in-person kind of events and spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive outlook. And another thing that I've been thinking about lately too is it's really brought awareness to the digital divide, and it's really made conversations around that happen that I don't think would be happening otherwise.
Mm.
Especially with a lot of artists have really struggled to be able to reach people, and just we're forcing that conversation to happen, which is so important.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great place to end it, unless there's anything else that you'd like to talk to my audiences about.
I think that all sounds good. I guess if I was just going to say anything to everyone, I'd just say that I look forward to meeting you in person when things open up again. And yeah, I'm just grateful for this conversation too.
Well, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Darby.